Milo McCloud, I never mess up. Run it back, take two. We can honestly keep it in there. We'll be raw and honest for the folks today. Milo McCloud, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How you doing this afternoon?
Very, very good. Thank you for having me on. It is a privilege to be here.
I would like to think I know the kind of guy you are based on following you on social media, just because you are so real. And we'll get into that in today's conversation. So, with someone like you, I feel more comfortable diving in on a serious note. I want to ask you this question. If we did this podcast a year from now, what would we be celebrating?
I think in terms of celebration, I think one of the things that I pride myself on is kind of being true to myself, but also the consistency and practicing what I preach. Um, and I would celebrate myself on that already now. I think I have been incredibly consistent with everything that I've been doing, but it would be more so helping others do the same thing and having them realize that they can be consistent and they can reach for those kind of unattainable or what they think is unattainable in their head and realize those kind of impossible dreams. And for me, that would be the absolutely biggest win a year from now for sure.
I could be wrong on this, so let me know if I am. But in following people like you on social media and in talking with them, a lot of you guys, and I certainly feel like this is the case for me, they feel that the content they produce and put out there, they feel a duty to the world to create something to inspire those people. For you, do you have a moment you can recall or go back to when you first felt that duty to inspire people?
Yeah, I think there's always been like a hankering of trying to share something, whatever that was. I didn't really know, and it always came in a kind of video form, from kind of starting editing with my brother when I was 6 years old, to making like short films with my dad, and skiing when I was in my teenagers. We're always kind of making edits, and it was always just fun. I loved it, and it was never a chore. And then going through into a kind of transformative phase of my life, be it through fitness, be it through improving my mental health and leaving a relationship, being able to share that journey online started from keeping myself accountable and then transitioning into a point where, okay, there are people messaging me now saying, thank you so much. This is like helped me get through this week, or it's just shifted my day. And that transition, even when I was at a very small account, a few hundred followers, having those kind of small messages, there was a kind of switch that went off that I realized, okay, I can actually make a difference here. And it doesn't need to just be a hobby. I can really actually help some people.
What would you say was the biggest barrier to you starting and documenting your own journey on social media?
Definitely imposter syndrome, 100%. I think there's always this feeling of, oh, I don't have the qualifications to talk about this. I don't. People are going to take the piss out of me. My friends are going to take the piss out of me, and there's always that kind of like, oh, how do you get over this? And I was actually on a run with my mate who's living with me at the moment last night, and he asked me basically if I still get that feeling every time I post of like that kind of guttural, like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And I was saying to him that I feel like in our day and age, if you can't be honest online and you can't be vulnerable and you don't have that feeling, I don't think your content is good enough. Because if you are feeling like a little bit nervous to post and a little bit out of your comfort zone, I think that's the perfect place for you to be, because that is showing who you truly are. And it is difficult. And I think the people that are doing that at the moment, the people that are being honest with themselves and people that are being honest with their audience, I think it's so much more relatable to a lot of other people out there. And I think it's the kind of content that I love to watch, because it makes me have a real connection with whoever's on the other side of it.
I love that. I love that reframing mindset. And I'm curious to dive deeper into that. How important would you say it is to reframe things like imposter syndrome, almost calling it positive there, of like,
Yeah,
if you
I
do,
like.
speaking to the audience, if you feel uncomfortable when you post something, when you state a goal, when you say something to a friend about a way of living, like it's probably a good thing, even though it's uncomfortable, lean into it.
I think that's exactly it. I think it's when it feels like you shouldn't do it, and when it's like, oh, like I really don't want to do this. That's like the key indicator for me. I'm like, okay, this is me doing something right. Like I know this is right because I'm struggling to do it. And if I'm struggling to do it, think about how many other people have not done it, not put it out there, and not helped other people. So if I can open that conversation, whether it's to do with mental health, whether it's to do with the type of training, whatever it is, I think reframing things into from a negative of like, oh, I really struggle with this myself, and then being like, look, I struggle with this. This is how I deal with it. Let me know how you struggle with it as well and how you deal with it. I think it's a way more honest and transparent way of working and kind of opening up conversations with our communities, and I think that's so key for us. I mean, obviously yourself and in the social sphere, I think having that relationship with your community is like non-negotiable.
I'll obviously leave your work in the show notes, and I would highly encourage people to go follow you on social media, specifically to have a context of some of the things we're talking about. In your series that we'll get into, I'm sure later on in this conversation, the London grind, you've shared many parts of your heart and been incredibly honest to an extent that I haven't really seen on social media, which has been amazing. What message would you say has resonated with people the most, that has surprised you?
I think it's interesting. Obviously, there's a level of like algorithmic magic and angel dust that we have no control over. Um, but there is an element of, when a video maybe doesn't do as well, but garners a really strong response. And I think for me, that was actually around alcohol. Um, and it's a topic that I think recently is becoming a lot more spoken about with the rise of kind of, I think it's kind of like alcohol skepticism, and basically people being more inclined to make this kind of sober jump, and especially in the cities that are around the world, like the major cities. I think there's this massive kind of culture of you finish work, you go straight to the pub or you go straight to the bar, and you drink for 4 or 5 hours with your bosses, your coworkers. And I think there's a subtle shift now. And I don't know necessarily if that's because of the echo chamber that I live in and the people that I follow and people I surround myself with, but I do feel like there is more of an openness when it comes to saying like, I'm not going to drink today. There's less of a stigma around that when it used to be like, oh, come on, like, stop being boring. I feel like now people respect it more and also will be more inclined to join you on that kind of progress. And I think videos that surround that, and me personally, I stopped drinking last year, and I don't think I'll ever not drink again. I just, when I speak about it, people have a very strong and visceral reaction, whether it's due to kind of an addiction that they've had, or if it's just kind of opened up their minds that they have a friend group that aren't necessarily the best for them, and how can they get away from that, and how can they find other people. And I think the world of running is a great kind of example of being able to join a run club and improve your friendship group and elevate the people that you're around. And I think those kind of communities, the running communities, the Hyrox communities, being able to go into there and say, oh, yeah, I'm not going to drink, it's a way friendlier place for those kind of conversations for sure.
It sounds like the same in the UK, but at least in the US, it's been interesting to see. I'm too young to drink, so I'm not probably the person to speak on this. But at least in my observation of culture, it seems that at least in the US, run clubs have taken over, just in general, taken over, period, but taken over. People who would be inclined to go to a bar to find community have found that community through personal development, through things like run clubs. Why do you think we're slowly starting to see a shift, I think, in culture, very broadly, of people being more invested in themselves, in trying to be better, and doing these very hard things? Like, run clubs
Mm.
are fun and easy for some people. For a lot of people, it's very uncomfortable. It's very hard. It's the complete opposite of drinking alcohol, in my opinion.
I agree. I think it is like a polar opposite. And it's funny, I think there's that release that you get when going on a run, that like runner's high. It is so visceral. And I think it's kind of like when you go through hard times with your friends, or you're on a rugby pitch, or you're playing football together and you beat a team. there's that camaraderie that you develop in those kind of like struggles. And I think with a run and you kind of grinding out 10, 15K on a long run with someone, you really get to know someone. And you also kind of get to experience the high afterwards and the coffee or the pastry. And it's a way more honest interaction than meeting for a drink. And in the dating scene in London, that is pretty much how it works. You organize, you go for a drink, and if you like that person, you probably get drunk. If you don't like that person, you probably get drunk. So either way, you're going to numb that kind of emotional connection. Whereas I feel like if you're on a run with someone, it's so honest and so true that if you like that person, you can just switch positions in that run group. And if you, sorry, if you don't like them, if you do like them, you can carry on that conversation. You can get the number, you can get their Instagram, whatever. And it's such a social environment. Um, and I completely see how people are drawn to it now because I know so many people have met their girlfriends, husbands, wives, whatever through run clubs and these kind of fitness communities.
What's your take on, I think in social media, like, I think we're both a little bit a part of this, scrolling through the algorithm, very inspirational videos,
Mm.
videos that like a lot of people will scroll on the couch and feel good about, but they won't actually take action for the information within the video. Why don't you think more people act on the things that they consume that they feel good about? Like, I feel like we're in a society today where people will watch Goggins for 2 hours, but not do a single thing that Goggins says to do, but they still love Goggins.
So true. I think that is actually spot on. I think I speak to my clients about this in my coaching, and there's a massive dopamine hit from planning. We all love getting a notebook out, doing a list, and being like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. It's the same as like hiring a PT. I've hired a PT, right? I'm going to get really fit. I'm going to get shredded. I'm going to get strong. Or I've got a gym membership. I'm going to get really strong and really fit. Those small acts, they feel like you've done the thing, but realistically, you've just been able to get access. All the work is about to happen. But it's the same thing when it's on social media. I think when you are liking posts, you're saving posts of motivation, think, oh, that's so good. I'm going to go run 250 miles in the Utah desert after doing like some firestorm thing that Goggins does. We get that same like dopamine hit when we save it and we think that we're going to go, all right, here are my goals. Here are my goals for 2024. And then when we get around to 2025 and we've accomplished none of them, the hard work is literally just by yourself in the rain, dark nights. Like it sucks a lot of the time. And I think it gets so glamorized by this kind of, oh yeah, look, come with me on my marathon, and I'm going to run sub three. The people that run sub three marathons have been training for so long and so hard that signing up to a marathon is really just the start of it. And I think people really need to understand that there's so much work that goes into every single one of these challenges, whether it's couch to 5K, whether it's a 100-mile race, and that dopamine hit of liking one of our videos or saving them is obviously massively appreciated by us. But I think the real win is when you get a DM saying, you've inspired me to go out and run my first 5K, or I've just broke my mile PR, or whatever it is. I think those are the ones that really, really hit for me. And really actually having a physical difference in someone's life is the most important thing.
When you were talking there, I was particularly impacted when you were discussing the New Year's resolution piece because I think it's something that gets talked a lot about at the beginning of the year. And then we're talking on April 23rd. By this time, no one's talking about it anymore because very few people have continued their resolutions. And I just looked it up. Researchers suggest that only poor UK people. I did not. I quickly typed this, so they're not included in this. But so apologies to the UK listeners. Researchers suggest that only 9% of Americans that make resolutions complete them. In fact, research goes on to show that 23% of people quit their resolution by the end of the first week, and 43% quit by the end of January. So within the first month of the year, 43% of people give up on themselves. What would you say to someone listening right now? We're having this discussion and they go back to that former self in December who had a lot of excitement for these goals, these personal ambitions to become the person they want to be, but they quit. And we're maybe planting some seeds in April and they're going back to that former self. What would you say to those people in terms of like, it's not too late to start and make this year your best year yet?
I think it's just never too late. You see videos of 60, 70 year olds smashing massive weights in the gym, having never had a fitness background until their late 60s. And here we are moaning that we've missed 2 weeks because we're ill and I'm not going to go back to the gym now because I've lost all my gains. That's just not how it works. It's such a mental game when it comes to these things. And I think for me, I've been ill the last 2 weeks and finally got back into it now. And there's always that voice in your head that thinks, oh, I like taking 2 weeks off. Like I'm going to be so unfit. I might as well just stop. And especially those New Year's resolutions when you miss your first, maybe you signed up to do park runs every week and you miss that first one. And you think, oh, I've missed the first one now. There's no point. It doesn't matter how many you miss. I think over the long period of time, like I say, like there are 365 days in a year, 52 weeks. Missing one of them is not a big deal. You can still smash 51 other park runs. You can still get back on track and think about that for the rest of your life. There are so many weekends for park runs. It's just such a small blip. If you look at the long-term vision, it's so much more expansive. And I think we all get focused on that such tiny time spectrum of like this week that it's so easy for us to go, oh, well, I've ruined all my progress. Realistically, it takes years and years to get into the mindset that you're able to be like, what's 1 week? I know that I'm going to be able to get there. It's just a matter of time. So yeah, I think it just takes a kind of level of mental maturity to realize that you are capable of everything that you set your mind to. It's just creating the discipline and resilience to be like, if shit hits the fan, it's okay. I'm still going to be able to do it, not fall out on yourself.
One of my favorite quotes I came across towards the end of last year that I want to get your take on is the magic you're looking for is in the work you're avoiding.
So true. Yeah, I saw you post about that, and I think it's so true. Everything that we shy away from is always due to that friction, um, whatever that is, and it's always the best results from the hardest work, and it's always the work that we want to avoid most. And it's so easy for us to do that. So I know I super resonated for that, um, and I think it's you can't put it better than that, really.
I think I saw this quote from you in yesterday's video, and I think it's very apropos to what we're talking about in terms of change and New Year's resolutions and trying to live a better life. You said, when the pain of your reality is more than the fear of change, you will change. Can you elaborate on this for me?
Yeah, I think there's this kind of, I call it the complacency trap of when things are not great, you're in maybe an average paying job, you're not necessarily happy, you're in a shitty relationship, but things are kind of okay. You maybe argue a few times a week, but you kind of grew up together, you're friends, you have the same friends, and it's just kind of like, it's not great, but it's not awful. And you kind of go through life and you think, this is okay. You live for the kind of paycheck to paycheck. And I think there is this kind of gap here where it's not bad enough for any change to be caused, for you to not hit rock bottom, for you to just kind of float around in this kind of middle shitness, lack of a better words. Sometimes you've got to hit that rock bottom hellhole where you think, I cannot cope with any more of this shit. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's your own mental state, whether it's your work, whether it's your fitness, whether it's the way you feel about yourself. And I think for me, that was a massive point when I had like a rock bottom moment, like ringing my dad up at 5 in the morning and going on. I didn't sleep for like 3 days because I'd hit such a low point in my relationship with the way that I looked at myself, the negative thoughts that I had, that it caused a massive kind of spring effect where I thought, right, I'm going to sort my life out. I'm going to leave my relationship. I'm going to put myself first. actually focus on myself, work on my mind, work on my body, invest in myself. And I think if I didn't have that, it's such a complacent area where you can kind of just skim through life. And I think there's a massive danger of that. So I think being aware and self aware of your position can allow you to avoid that. But you do have to be in this sphere of consuming kind of self development content. And I think Instagram probably and other social networks probably won't show this kind of content to the people that actually need it, which is a shame. So I think the more that we can kind of raise awareness around that kind of area, I think the better, because I think a lot of people are kind of innocently complacent and don't realize it.
Speaking of being at that low point, being at rock bottom, I think I posted this on my story yesterday for like quote of the day. I don't call it that, but I just post quotes that stick out to me. And the quote was, if you have nothing going for you, now is the best time to take a big risk because you have everything to gain and nothing to lose. Being the underdog makes you a dangerous competitor. You have nothing to lose, everything to gain, and no one sees you coming. Don't resent it, lean into it. You have the advantage of being underestimated, and it's an advantage you only get once. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I love that. I think you have to lean into your advantage, and I think everyone's got an unfair advantage. You being the reigning champion, you have the advantage of experience massively. But you being the underdog, you have the massive advantage of no pressure. And pressure can weigh an absolute ton on the people at the top. So going in with no expectations and going in for pure enjoyment, I think is massive. And for me, I've always tried to kind of embody that and go into something like naive enough to start, stubborn enough to finish is one of my favorite quotes. And I think if you can do that throughout life, you're going to always be the underdog, and people are going to kind of never see you coming. Um, and you're going to be able to try so many different things by doing it that way.
I want to hear more about your progression and journey to get on social media and start creating inspiring pieces of content. Can you take me through when you first got that spark to start inspiring people and kind of your journey and progression up until present day and all the accomplishment and success you've experienced? I know you're very humble and you probably wouldn't say that, but I can certainly say that.
For sure. I appreciate it. And yeah, my kind of content journey, I'd say, started when I was in lockdown, and it was just after, as I said earlier, the kind of big low that I had, and this kind of big old hellhole that I had to go through when I was unfit, was overweight, I was in this kind of poor relationship, and I was in a job that I hated. So I left the job that I hated. I started my own company. I started going and running around my park because during lockdown we could basically only run for or be outside for half an hour a day. So all I do is eat the same food every day. I'd run around the park every day, and every lap that I'd do, there was a pull-up bar, and I would film myself on my phone doing pull-ups every day. And at the start, I couldn't do any pull-ups, and I used to be an athlete when I was in my teens. So realizing how unfit you are from being in an athletic background is super humbling, because it's like your whole world has been flipped upside down. And I didn't identify with the person that I was. I was thinking, this isn't me. I used to be able to do 20 pull-ups. Now I can't do any. I have to use bands, and I have to use every help that I can get to be able to do one. And it's just super demotivating when you are in that stage. But documenting that process, I didn't necessarily post on social media at that time, but I started filming everything that I was doing. And then as I got more comfortable with being on camera and more comfortable with my body and how I looked, I started posting the older videos of me progressing my pull-ups and using bands. And then I was able to do 10 pull-ups. Then I was able to do muscle ups. And then I got into calisthenics, and my body started changing. I'd lost 50 pounds, and I started getting into bodybuilding, and then gyms opened up. And then I started documenting this process and doing gym vlogs for TikTok. And after a while, it kind of snowballs, and the content was very different. And I was in a very different headspace at that point. I was younger. Things were going very well for me, personal development wise. My business was doing well. I was just very happy and quite innocent as a person. and hadn't really had a lot of the out world experience because of lockdown. So I was kind of just doing my own thing. And then through various difficult years where my business ended up collapsing and through many different reasons, it took a lot of a toll on me. And also, I learned a huge amount of lessons about business, about life, about people. And I think for me, that was a massive shift through my content that I was posting. I used to post quite comedic, silly skits, vlogs in the gym. And it got to a point where I couldn't maintain that level. I couldn't maintain that character because I just simply wasn't feeling like it. I was borderline depressed, anxious all the time, and making content for the sake of making content is kind of a one-way road to nowhere. And for me, being able to kind of actually be honest with myself and be like, okay, this is happening in my life. I'm stepping away from what I've created. I'm shifting into a new style of content. And there definitely was a interim period where it wasn't quite working. People didn't quite identify with it. And it took a while for it to find the right audience. And I think there's always going to be that gap of you transitioning into someone that's becoming a better version of yourself and people also realizing who you're becoming. And you're going to get people that fall off and don't watch you for that. And that's fine. But you also find new people that are like, I really aspire to have this level of self-awareness. And for me to be actually just completely honest with myself was so refreshing. And then finding other people that also enjoyed that content was like, I'm being honest with myself, you're being honest with me. There's no kind of screen in between it. And that for me was like the biggest realization of, okay, this is what I'm made to do. Not comedy skits, not making stupid videos, which can be fun. It's making stuff that I find matters, making people have a physical, emotional reaction to my content and actually being like, okay, I'm going to change this aspect of my life. And for me, that's been my kind of journey towards where I am today. And it's really been only the last few months where that kind of full transition, as you said, the London Grind, the series that I started, has really put me into the limelight of that kind of area of social media.
I want to dive into a specific aspect of your response there, the part where you were kind of decently into making content and you felt like you were making this character at this point and could no longer live out that character for like those gym vlogs, whatnot, and wanted to transition into more honesty about the journey and just being more openly yourself. And my mentor shared me, I'm a big quotes guy, if you can't already tell, so I'm gonna bring out another quote.
So,
My mentor shared this quote with me last June. It's definitely a hot take. I want to get your take on it, but I do think it's true, and I think it embodies what a lot of people I think in this world fall into, of like creating a character and how exhausting that is if
mm,
you aren't true to yourself. So the quote is: social media influencers often find it fun and exciting at first, but then their entire lives become commercializing their identity on a personality marketplace. For most, but not all, professional influencing ends with emptiness and misery.
mm,
It's a
that's
super like serious quote, but I think I see a lot of truth to it.
yeah. I think it cuts through. Like I think there's a lot of people that they put on a character because it's like it's protection, right? You don't want necessarily people to know who you are, what you're doing, what you love, because it feels difficult. It's vulnerable to tell people how you're feeling. Um, and like you say, like holding up a character is incredibly exhausting, and it leads to burnout. It leads to all of those things that you just said. And I think the only way to have longevity in this industry and treat it as a job is actually to be you. And if you're being you, you can't really get exhausted of being yourself because that's just me day to day. Like I love what I do and I do it because it helps people and I also do it because helps me. I don't think I'll ever change from that. But ultimately, if I was to ever kind of change my content, it would only ever be in the kind of way that I'm changing myself. So I don't think I'll ever transition back into a place where I'm doing something for the sake of others, not myself.
What do you feel like your mission in life is? I know that's an extreme question, but I know you're a guy who thinks through these kind of things. At least as we're talking right now, what do you feel like your mission is?
That's a very, very good question. I think my mission in life, it sounds so cheesy to say inspire others. Um, but I do think that the way that I've kind of gone through life, I've always wanted to push myself through everything that I've done. I used to do a lot of alpine skiing. That was kind of my job when I was a teenager, and it was amazing. I'm super grateful for it. I was never good enough to be able to make a living out of it. Um, and I think for me, being able to kind of transition that level of competitiveness and drive into a career where I can really dive into that, be fitness, and help other people in that way. For me, it was, I kind of found my calling after my business collapsed last year by helping other people and seeing them run half marathons or do their first 5K. There was just like a surreal moment of like, this is exactly what it should feel like for work. This work is not work because it's so rewarding. And being able to run a half marathon with a client, for me, was probably one of the most visceral moments of this year. And it was actually a mate of mine, and being able to pace him, I think was probably one of the best things that I've ever done. Seeing him cross the finish line and beat the time that he wanted to, and completely smash his own standards out the park, and allowing him to feel that and being there with him. If I can amplify that to a larger audience and a larger scale in the next 20, 30 years, then our mission accomplished for sure.
One of my favorite videos was your documentation, and you briefly discussed some of what was in this video, but your documentation of, I would just call it your athlete progression, how you got really intense into lifting and bodybuilding after
Mm.
being overweight, being in a tough place, and then how that kind of led to a darker place, and then now being obsessed with running. Can you kind of take the people through your journey and fitness progression? I know you shared some of it, but filling it out all the more,
Yeah,
specifically present day, this love with running.
for sure. I think the everyone's journey is very different, and I think a lot of that starts either from a sporting background at school or you're completely non-sporty. And for me, I was not very sporty in some kind of more traditional sports like ball sports, like rugby, hockey, cricket. That's what we play in England. I wasn't particularly good at any of them, but I kind of found my natural sport when I went to live in France when I was younger. So I picked up skiing, and it turned out to be good. So I basically then spent the next 9 years of my life traveling in France, um, across Europe, Canada, all sorts of different places, simply to kind of broaden my skiing career and compete in an international level, competing for my country. So being able to do that really sparked this kind of competitive edge where I now then basically lost all my fitness after that point. I fell in love with the wrong person, the kind of classic, and it led to a kind of very poor, toxic relationship where for 3 years I didn't really know myself, and I lost that real kind of self awareness and self love, which is super sad when I see other people do it and you don't really notice it happening when you're in it. So I basically didn't work out, I didn't train, I didn't do anything for 3 years. And that led me to when I was 21, I decided enough was enough. Again, I had that kind of big, eye opening, bad night. And it then kind of trajected me back into this bodybuilding world where we discussed losing weight and getting back into shape. But bodybuilding obviously has its own challenges, being the level of body dysmorphia that it can create, the kind of hypercritical element is, for me, very difficult. And I think I know a lot of people that also struggle with it, not seeing who they actually are in the mirror. And that kind of mindset is so, so difficult to maintain. And I respect all the bodybuilders out there that do it because it is brutal, mentally and physically. And then I discovered running last year, actually having found Russ Cook and watching his YouTube back in when he started running across Africa. And me and my best mate, we decided to book a marathon because he was running 2 every day. We thought, how hard can it be? I was never a runner. I hated running. Like genuinely came last in cross country. I remember it because it was horrible. And watching that video, I thought, I need to get good at running. And this is a perfect excuse for me to actually just get over myself, get over this bullshit idea that I can't run, I'm slow at running. I know it's bollocks, but it's what I've been told and it's what I've told myself for so many years. So I started running, and for the first 6 weeks, it was awful. Like I'm pretty sure I had every injury under the sun. I had shin splints, I had like plantar fasciitis, like maybe some tears in my calves. I was also like peak bulk at this point. I just finished in powerlifting, so I was like 20 kilos heavier, and it was tough. But I do remember the first run that I ever had the runner's high, and after that point, that like hybrid training just took off for me, and I wanted to try everything. So I increased my running. I started buying more running shoes, as we all do. Started getting into triathlons. So I then competed in a sprint triathlon in London that year, and then really then started diving into running. And then Hyrox, I discovered a community of people that through running and run clubs had also kind of discovered this new sport called Hyrox, and I had no clue what it was. And it's essentially like a fitness race where you combine running with other kind of circuit activities, and then combining that with my traditional kind of bodybuilding background, I just had this essential flow where I felt I could accomplish all my goals of feeling good, looking good, and just having fun with people. And it's a lonely world training by yourself in a gym by yourself, competing in bodybuilding. And having that community aspect for me was one of the biggest changes that I've recognized in the last few years. And getting involved in run clubs and Hyrox has probably been the best thing I could ever recommend to someone coming from a kind of more traditional bodybuilding gym bro background for sure.
I'm not sure if there is something, but I'll ask it as if there is. What's your version of running for you when you were a 21-year-old? What I mean by that is when you were 21, you were scared of running, you had these limiting beliefs about it and about yourself. What's that version for you today? What are you scared of chasing after or tackling?
Ooh, that's you see, this is the kind of conversation I really like because the the things that scare me and the things that scare me to say, I know that I really want to do, um, but I also don't necessarily want to want to commit to them. Uh, one of them is running a marathon in the Arctic, which sounds mad. But I've always had this massive affinity to the mountains, having kind of grown up there. And I think if I can kind of combine both of my passions now of running and of that kind of mountaineering with an extreme level of cold, and obviously it's just going to be so hard. And I don't know necessarily how hard it's going to be. And I think the thing that I said about earlier, being naive enough to start, is so true with stuff like this and these kind of challenges and being so scared about what you're doing. Um, and I think that's the perfect place to be. So I think that's definitely going to be something I'm going to do. And it's something that I'm absolutely terrified of. And I don't know if I'm going to enjoy any of it, but I think it will be amazing at the same time. So yeah, I'll keep you posted how that goes.
Next time we do a podcast, maybe it'll be recapping it, which would be really cool.
Exactly.
You've documented in this conversation the ability to change one's life. And I love the saying, you're under no obligation to be the person you were 5 minutes ago. I think it's so
Mm.
true. I think we can constantly change and improve. As long as you're living and breathing, you can always become a better person. For you, what would you say to someone listening in the audience who's impacted by your story, who's in a tough spot, but has the self awareness to know that they can get more out of their life? What would you say to them?
I saw someone approach Gary Vee in a similar way, of kind of she said to him, "One day I'm going to be somebody," and he then said back to her that you already are somebody now. I think that's what you need to realize is the people out there that want to chase their dreams and think I'm going to be happy when this happens, or I'm going to be happy when I get to this. A massive part of what I've kind of learned is that you should be happy during the journey and realizing that the shit bits, the hard bits, you're probably going to look back at them and be like, that was when it really counted. That's when it really mattered. And that's the moments I almost enjoy the most. So if you can look at the period where you are now and think, okay, I'm going to try and enjoy this moment because I know that the work I'm putting in is going to lead into a much stronger and better self. And knowing that you are somebody, you do matter, and that everything that you're doing right now is working towards a better version of yourself, then you're doing something great. But you have to realize that you need to enjoy the process because you're never going to be happy at the end of it because you've built it up on such a high pedestal that when you get there, you're going to think, oh, that was it. All right. Well, I'm done now. You have to enjoy the process. And I think falling in love with that process is so vital.
I love the saying, "The journey is the reward."
Mm,
I think
100%.
it's spot
100%.
on. Another thing in the running community that I love is like the race is just the celebration of all the hard work. You know, you can't
Yeah.
do anything on race day that will elevate you anymore. You know, the training's going to show. And I think for the people that listen to this, and certainly for you, like when you go into a race, you're going to do everything you can to step on that line as fully prepared as you can be. And the race is just a celebration to that former self who woke up at those ridiculously early times to get in those long runs, who went to the gym when they were tired, all of those things. I think going back to something we were talking about earlier, reframing this can make it such a different experience.
100%. I think that the hardest part of like a running marathon prep or a bodybuilding prep is simply getting to the start line. The race, as you say, should be the reward and the enjoyment, and you can go out there and take it all in. That should be your main focus, not kind of absolutely go out guns blazing. I think the journey is really the hardest part to enjoy. But if you can enjoy that, then honestly, I think that some of my fondest memories are the kind of early sunrise runs through London. Those are the very special to me, um, and they were hard, and they were getting up at 4 a.m. But they have such a hold in my memory through last year's summer that I think the race didn't even matter if I did well or not because the process that I led up to that point was so amazing, and I met so many people during that it was so worth it.
As we wrap up our conversation today, Milo, which I've loved, again, I think so core to you, and it's shown in this conversation, is your honesty and vulnerability. Can you speak to that to the audience of why that's core to who you are and why they should try to embody it more in their day to day life?
I think it's so important to me to be honest because we live in a world now through our screens where honestly we don't know if people are being honest at all. There's a lot of fakery. There's just a people put out the highlights, right? And we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't really know people that we see online. We may think we do, and it can lead to that kind of comparison and comparing our lives to someone else's lives, comparing your number one to someone else's number 10. It's super toxic, super dangerous, and really, really difficult to get out of that cycle. So, being kind of present in your own journey and being self aware enough to realize that you are doing your own path and you do not need to think about anyone else's and thinking kind of on your deathbed, oh, like you're not going to be thinking about anyone else. You're going to be thinking, I really wish that I went and climbed those mountains with my friends that weekend when I could have, and taking in those experiences that you're always going to remember for the rest of your life. And I think being able to fill your life with experiences and using them as milestones and trying not to live the same day over and over would be something I'd massively encourage because we don't measure our life in the kind of day-to-day activities. We measure it in the memories that we make with people. And for me, my goal really in life is to make as many memories as possible doing the kind of most memorable things. And that is a difficult thing to do, but we have to be open to those opportunities. And if you can say yes, then you're going to lead a happier life.
Milo, final serious question for you. If the next 5 years is a chapter in your life, what's this current chapter about?
This for me would be my creative growth phase. I had 5 years where I basically shut myself off to the world and focused on self development, finding myself, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm in a place where I really want to share what I found and help as many people as possible, but also enjoy my 20s as well. And I think we can get so caught up in self development and work and grind that we forget to actually have fun. So, yeah, creative, driven, but also enjoy the time that we have.
Milo, final question I have for you. The question I ask every single guest on every single podcast. I love asking it to the UK guests in particular because you guys claim him. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
Beef Wellington, no doubt.
You can make beef Wellington?
Yeah, it's probably my biggest showstopper.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
impressive because I have people who come on. I get a wide range of responses. Yesterday's guest was straight up serious and they said cereal. Doesn't really
Uh,
answer my question. I have other people who say things like that, but I know they can't make it. You walk the
you,
walk, talk the talk. You can
you've
make
got
beef
to back
Wellington.
yourself. I'll send you a
Whew.
picture of the beef Wellington that I've made. I've done dinner parties before with them. Um, there's a real key to it, and I've done that without a meat thermometer as well. So I haven't
Really?
cheated. Yeah, I've gone by complete eye and guesswork.
A man of many talents, Milo McCloud. It's been a privilege and a pleasure talking with you again. I've said this to you many times, but your content is truly impactful and inspirational. And like I know on the other side of the world, Milo McCloud is grinding, getting the work done. And to me, that's like an affirmation to do my own work and to inspire the world in the ways in which I'm hoping to. So keep up the good work. I guess I think they say this in the UK. Today's podcast was good fun and know my full support in the future. You're absolutely crushing it. And it was a privilege speaking with you today, learning from you.
Likewise, absolute pleasure, and I cannot put it better myself. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.